3.1 LEM is out of the door, and now it's time to take a look at the future. Now, there will not be any additional patches in the short term, or at least anything that we expect coming into our general direction. However, we've been informed by the developers on what to expect from the Custodian initiative, as well as the further development of the game in terms of expansion content. Now, it is important to know that in general, the team is looking to release a new free update every 3 months. That translates to about 4 times a year. That may slip a little bit and be due to issues down the line because production is production. These sort of things do happen. However, in general, every 3 months you can expect a Custodian update, and whether or not those go in tandem with the major updates in terms of expansions and stuff like that is something that is still up for debate. This translates to that the next update for Stellaris can be expected in November. Now, the 3.2 update that is going to land in November, it will not be as expansive as the 3.1 LEM update. In LEM, of course, we had the rework for plantoids, we had the rework for humanoids, and a little bit of necroids as well, but that is not going to be the case with the 3.2 update. Of course, they had a very long warm-up time to get LEM out of the door, and now it's time to take a look at, does LEM, the format of what the Custodians have been working on, does that work, or do I need to scale back in order to fit it into that 3-month development cycle? And what you can expect there is more quote-unquote safe improvements, not necessarily anything along the lines of massive updates for existing content, but still polishing and nourishing the current state of the game, and basically have a not-so-spicy update for this one. That could go for the 3.3 update, but we'll see when that is. 3.3 will be looking to be released sometime in February, and that's where the really big stuff is going to come in. We've already discussed in the past the Unity and the Sprawl rework. We actually spoke to Daniel Moregård regarding this, and we had a couple of very interesting things to say regarding this.
It's like, when you have like a first thought and you start developing a system, and then you realize like it's not worth the effort and time to keep going with this system as it's currently designed in that trajectory, right? It's better to like redesign it and take it somewhere else. For example, like admin cap, like that for me, that's one of those examples of like a mechanic that I feel like has probably not went in a good direction. I would probably like change that to do something that's more robust. Admin cap, like technically, right? It's used as a modifier right now instead of a resource. So that also makes it a lot harder to work with in the game because you need to create custom code solutions as soon as you want to do something, right? You know that there are modifiers, for example, like that, like specialist job output increased by 10%. That does not affect anything outside resources. It doesn't affect if they produce more amenities, trade value, or admin cap, because those are not implemented as resources. They're implemented as modifiers. So it's a lot of those things that makes it a lot harder rather than working with, for example, things that are implemented purely as resources, like the research categories or food or minerals or whatever, right? Those are a lot more dynamic and easier to work with. For example, like where we wanted to take it in a direction where it's more like, the administrative costs of your empire, I don't think it turned out very well because we never like finished the balance for it. And it's just like the trajectory that I had imagined for that. I don't think it's worth continuing that line. So I think it's like better to like redo that aspect. The game currently, like I think you snowball way too much. And we've sort of allowed it for a while now because like it's more about the fantasy than the balance. But I also think we've lost a little bit too much of like what makes the game a fun puzzle. I'm not saying that it isn't that. I'm just saying like I would perhaps want it to be like, let's say 10% more of that than it currently is, or whatever, right? The fact that admin cap works as it is right now, where you can go up to the cap so relatively easily, that bureaucrats and administrators produce so much of the admin cap, means that it's so easy to get, and the costs are not like immediately obvious either, like how that you have to spend pops to work as bureaucrats, etc. Like you don't really like feel good about producing admin cap.
Because they don't really feel like a resource because you don't know how many you have.
Yeah, and you only produce it to avoid a penalty, right? You can't use it for anything else.
Yeah, you don't really get a bonus out of it. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So it would have been smarter to do something like, have the bureaucrats produce a resource, and that resource, trying to do the same things that the admin cap is trying to achieve, right? The larger your empire is, the more penalties to things like tradition cost and research cost I think you should have. But that's the problem with admin cap right now, is like you just increase it to avoid the cost instead of really like making it a more engaging thing. Because I've mentioned like in previous like roadmaps, I've name dropped things like institutions or I can't remember what I talked about. But it's an obvious fantasy, right? Let's say you had like an admiralty or something like that you wanted to increase the size of. It should probably be tied to like your bureaucratic capacity somehow. But doing that through admin cap and just like, I don't think that's a good direction for it.
So yeah, the design for admin capacity, according to the developers, has never really felt good in any way, shape, or form. Admin capacity, for those of you who don't know, is the system that basically illustrates how wide your empire can be before it impacts the overall administrative side of things. You will need the administrative buildings in order to counteract this, otherwise things are going to get more costly due to the inherent paperwork involved in this. And yes, that's kind of what is simulated there. However, like I said, the developers are not really happy about how this system is going to work, and admin cap, as we've already talked about, is most likely going to get removed completely, and they're going to be looking at a very different approach, which lands us to the resource that is in the game which has been criminally underused, and that is Unity. Now, Unity is one of those systems that is generally focused on the tradition tree, and an extension of that, the ascension perks. Later on down the line, they added the Unity ambitions, but even then, you still have a huge amount of Unity available in order to do the things that you want to do, and you end up with this gigantic pile of Unity that you don't have any use for. And this is a sink versus a faucet game design issue. Basically, you have a large influx of a certain resource, but you have no way of spending it. So this is most likely going to happen when it comes to Unity. For once, Empire Sprawl is going to get removed. To a certain degree. It will still exist to a certain degree, but you will no longer be able to mitigate it as much as you have in the past. So expect administrators to have a different type of income or a different type of effect on Empire Sprawl. And instead, Unity is going to be used on internal systems rather than what Influence was used to do in the past. So as an example here, edicts, which are currently using the Influence system, are going to be using Unity in terms of upkeep costs. So what you could expect there is maybe an initial influence cost plus a Unity monthly cost modifier there. And that is a very interesting approach there. But in addition, you could also have a Unity upkeep cost in order to reduce the research cost penalty that you're going to get from Empire Sprawl. And all of this stuff is going to get balanced and juggled around a little bit, and a lot of the game design part of that has not really been set in stone. In addition to that, you also have pops that are not particularly happy, and they are angry in that particular case. And how can you counteract that? By having a high Unity upkeep cost. Basically, if you have a very high amount of unhappy pops, you will need to spend Unity, and you'll need to generate a reasonable amount in order to keep on that particular faucet, and basically make sure that you're generating enough. But yeah, this is a very interesting approach here, and I'm really looking forward to see how Unity in the future is going to be more of a core item within the game rather than right now just being thrown onto a giant money pile, as you would mainly expect from, say, your Scrooge McDuck style empires, where you just have a giant Unity bin and you don't really use it for anything except to show off to other empires. Like, look at all this giant pile of stuff that we don't use for anything. In addition to that, there's going to be some very interesting approaches in terms of how people can get involved in choosing what the custodians are going to be working on. So right now, the developers are looking at the possibility of adding an open beta to the development cycle of the game. And basically, this could be a approach of, hey, this is what we're testing out. This is what we're currently working on. Would you guys like to join in and have your opinion about how does this work? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think this is a bad idea? Should we rework this system in favor of something else? Is this a direction that you see the game developing in a positive way? And this is actually really important because QA, for all the crap that they get, only have a limited amount of time to focus on certain bugs or systems. And as soon as a expansion releases, you have hundreds of thousands of work hours being dumped into the game immediately, and things start popping up that are not necessarily noticed all that much by QA, and obviously this has knock-on effects for the community not being happy. So opening up an open beta for players in order to get a better idea of how the development is going, especially in a game as sprawling as Stellaris, is a really good idea, and I really hope that they're going to go into that general direction, because having like weekly snapshots would be really, really nice. And in addition to that, they're just trying things out. It's the Custodians as it is right now is very much at a early stage of development. None of the other Paradox games are doing anything like this. So it's interesting to see how they're trying to develop this sort of thing. In addition to that, when it comes to bugs that you have right now, one thing that I was not aware of, and you may have been, but maybe it's now a good time to take a look. The forums for Stellaris, specifically the bug forums, are somewhat of a voting system on what is going to be worked on in the near future for various teams. So if you have a particular bug that you are really annoyed by, go over towards the bug forums. I will put a link in the description below, and basically a semi-vote system is there to make sure that the eyeballs of developers are on certain issues with the game, and they will be proactively be worked on. So please be aware of that. It goes under the radar. I do hope the developers will put a link to the bug forums in the game launcher in order to make this a little bit more visible. But yeah, the Custodian Initiative 3.2 is coming in our direction in November, 3.3 in February, and in addition to that, Unity is going to be a new core feature within the game. We're going to wrap things up here. I hope that you've learned something today, and if you want to keep in touch and be updated about what's going on in the world of Stellaris, as well as all the zaniness that happens in and around of the game, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and we will keep you up to date as things develop. In the meantime, though, we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you so much for my patrons for making the channel possible, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, eat Shutter.